Welcome to tonight's District Attorney Candidate Forum presented by the Southwest Omaha Neighborhood Alliance, or SWONA. SWONA is comprised of over 50 neighborhood and homeowner associations in Southwest Omaha, west of 72nd to Elkhorn and south of Dodge to Harrison. Sponsored by the City of Omaha in coordination with the Office of Neighborhood Engagement, SWONA and its members association engage residents on a wide range of issues from planning to public safety. I'm Rachel Gibson, Vice President of Action for the League of Women Voters of Nebraska, and I'll be the facilitator for tonight's conversation. Like SWONA, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse political candidates or parties. Our objective tonight is for voters to hear about issues and policies directly from candidates in a nonpartisan manner. For more information about election process, details about general and state candidates, and information directly from candidates, please visit the League of Women Voters website, or those who are here tonight can visit our League of Women Voters table after the event. Our format tonight features a series of questions with each candidate allowed 3 minutes for an initial response. After each candidate has spoken, the candidate who responded first will be provided 1 minute of rebuttal. The order was determined by a drawing, and the first speaker will shift for each question. After the formal section of questions, in-person audience members will have the opportunity to ask questions in a 15-minute question and answer period. So we encourage all of you who are here tonight to jot down questions as you have them, as we'll open the floor later. Finally, I'd like to welcome our virtual attendees who are joining us via the KPAO YouTube live stream. In addition to recording this conversation, it will be broadcast on KPAO Omaha Community Television and will be posted to their website as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you both for being here tonight. We are very thankful for your engagement of voters, and we're going to begin with candidate introductions. From the random drawing, Mr. Klein, you are first on our list, so you each have 4 minutes to tell us about yourself and why you're running for the office of Douglas County Attorney. Mr. Klein?
Thank you very much, and good evening, and thank you to SWONA for putting this on tonight. I'm certainly appreciative of that and being able to engage the voters. My name's Don Klein. I'm your elected Douglas County Attorney. A little bit about my background. I'm from Omaha. I was born and raised here in South Omaha. My dad was a railroader for Union Pacific. Went to school here, went to Kearney, UNK now for college. And got into the prosecutor's office early on, right after I was admitted to Creighton Law School and graduated from Creighton Law School. I've been very fortunate to have people mentor me throughout my career in this business. I look forward to continuing that work that I've done over the last 16 years and before as the Chief Deputy and the head of the Department of Justice for the state of Nebraska. I'm married to my wife, Kim, who's a registered nurse. We have 3 children and 5 grandchildren. The reason I'm running for this office is because I really believe we have such a great team there at the county attorney's office, and we've done a remarkable job over the last 16 years for the people of the city of Omaha. I know how hard our people work in doing this job, and we have the background and experience to do the job. My goal is to keep the people of Omaha safe, and that's what we've tried to do. We've worked very hard at that over the years. It's also to hold people who commit crimes accountable and responsible for the crimes they've committed. And thirdly, it's to give people that deserve it a second chance. We've been at the forefront. We've been pioneers in Douglas County with regard to problem-solving courts, the first drug court in the state of Nebraska, a young adult court that we've recently expanded, Veterans Treatment Court, which is a new addition to the problem-solving courts, mental health diversion and a diversion program. So we keep about 350 people at any given time that are charged with felonies out of the system by giving them the opportunities in the problem-solving courts. Very important aspect of our job and very worthwhile. Also as part of this job, we've made great advances, I think, with regards to the kind of office we have, the type of office we have. 52%, I think over 50% of our lawyers in the office, our deputy county attorneys, are females or women. As you know, in the last several years, 13 people actually have been appointed to judgeships from my office. 6 of those to the district court in Douglas County are females. Historic events with regards to the transformation of the district court bench to have the number of females that we have on it, which is a great thing. I'm very proud of those individuals. The first African-American female judge in the history of the state of Nebraska, Tressa Aliath, came from my office during these years. And there's many more. So we're very proud of the work that we've done in difficult times. You know, we managed the COVID situation, I think, very well. And we were able to keep up with the cases that we have, which is a multitude of cases. We file about 4,400 felony cases a year. We have approximately 40 murder cases pending right now. So it's a very, very busy place. And I love working for the people of Douglas County in this capacity, and I want to continue to do the job that we've done over the years. Thank you.
Mr. Pantos?
Thanks so much to SWONA and to the German American Society Hall. What a beautiful location for this engagement, this forum. And my name is Dave Pantos, and I'm running for Douglas County Attorney. I've been a lawyer for 26 years, and I strongly believe, and the reason I'm running is because Douglas County and Nebraska all need criminal justice reform, and we need it now. We need prison reform because, folks, unlike any other election, this election is probably the most important because democracy is on the ballot. And just Sunday, I was at St. Benedictine Church in North Omaha, and an elderly parishioner came up to me and said to me, "Mr. Pantos, I'm really worried about democracy. I'm really worried about my freedom." And I said to him, "You know, I'm worried too. I can tell you this, as your next county attorney, I will fight for your freedoms because right now, Pete Ricketts and his family have spent almost $2 million to get a horrible voter ID bill on the ballot. This voter ID bill is designed to disenfranchise thousands of people of color and elderly people in Nebraska. Yes, that means they will be denied the right to vote. This was bought and paid for by the Ricketts family, which is also underwriting the campaign of my opponent. So democracy is on the ballot. And as your next county attorney, I will fight for your right to vote and your freedom." And, you know, sometimes we talk about progress in society, and, you know, 100 years ago, a lot of folks who were new immigrants to our country faced all sorts of discrimination. And over time, you know, they've become more integrated. But you always have to continue to fight for that progress and those rights. When I was growing up, Roe versus Wade was an established precedent of the Supreme Court, which meant that women and their doctors would not be put in prison for exercising reproductive freedom. And just this year, Roe v. Wade was overturned. And now the right-wingers in the Nebraska legislature want to come back and criminalize abortion. And that is terrifying. I've talked to so many women, doctors, folks in the healthcare field, and they are terrified about what's next. And I just want to reiterate my commitment that I've made online and in other forums, that as your next county attorney, I will not prosecute women, I will not prosecute doctors for exercising their reproductive freedom. So there's a lot at stake in this election. You know, I talk about criminal justice reform, and I know we'll be getting into the details about the fact that we didn't get LB 920 over the finish line in the spring. But the fact is that it's all tied together. Democracy, choice, and reforming our criminal justice system. They're all part of the same issue. And I am the only candidate in this race that is championing those freedoms and championing democracy in this election. So you can go to davepantos.com to find out more about me and my platform and what's next for the Douglas County Attorney's Office after you vote for me. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for those introductions. Both of you hit on several issues that we're going to cover in our questions. Again, we're going to begin with the questions from SWONA, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So for our first question, and Mr. Pantos, you'll be the first responder here. You'll have 3 minutes, and then Mr. Klein will have 3 minutes, and then Mr. Pantos, you'll have 1 more minute for rebuttal. So this first question is about gun violence and penalties. As reported by the Omaha World Herald, Nebraska's prison inmate population is growing faster than anywhere else in the nation. The article concludes that much of the growth is due to a 2009 state law that created new gun crimes and tougher penalties. As Douglas County District Attorney, how will you balance punishment for gun-related violence and the increasingly heavy financial and human cost of our overcrowded prisons? Specifically, what policies will you advance to the unicameral should it consider revising the earlier legislation? Again, you have 3 minutes, and we'll begin with Mr. Pantos.
Thank you. This is a very important issue. And coincidentally, it was announced today that Moms Demand, an excellent organization that's leading the fight for safe streets through gun reform, endorsed me. And so I want to thank Moms Demand for that endorsement. It really does mean a lot to have your trust and support in this election. And this issue of prison overcrowding is absolutely a huge one. I think LB 920 would have done a lot to alleviate that. We'll talk more about that later. I know the Omaha World Herald identified increasing penalties for gun violence as being a huge issue. And I do think that we need to do more to make sure that we're not filling up our prisons, so we're having to continue to build more and more new prisons. I mean, it's a huge issue. Right now, we're already looking at a $250 to $300 million new prison. Senator Steve Lathrop said in the debate over LB 920 that that's just the start, and we're going to be seeing more and more of these. That's why we absolutely need prison reform and criminal justice reform. We need to stop the jamming out of prisoners who are serving their full time, so they're being released without any kind of parole supervision, for example. So when it comes to gun violence, I mean, one thing we absolutely need to do, and we had this horrific scenario this summer where the same gun store was broken into twice and weapons were stolen. And it didn't seem to me that any actions were done by the owners of those gun stores to do anything to increase their security. So I think we absolutely need to tighten liability of gun stores for theft, and making sure that any kind of weapons are being secure in the most efficient, most safe way, because we need to keep illegal guns off our streets. That's absolutely important. But that being said, we have to look at the racial disparities in prosecution and sentencing. I mean, you can't ignore the fact that Nebraska is among the worst in the country when it comes to racial disparities in sentencing and in incarceration. You can't ignore that. So my question is, these strong gun laws, how well are we addressing racial disparities? I don't think we're addressing them at all, so we're doing it poorly. When I come in as your next county attorney, I will advocate for legislation that will help fund an overall racial audit of prosecution and sentencing, not just in Douglas County, but throughout the entire state, although I think the primary focus should be on Douglas County because that's where the increase is in terms of sentencing and incarceration. While overall Nebraska is down, Douglas County is up. We need to do something about it.
Thank you. Mr. Klein?
Thank you. I guess I'll just start with, I've been endorsed by all of law enforcement. The Omaha Police, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, the Nebraska State Patrol, Douglas County Correctional Officers, the state FOP. But the important thing that we're talking about with this question, which I think is part of what we're going to answer, is the term is used in there, the human cost of overcrowding the prison. The human cost that's involved here is the lives that have been lost, is the people who have been shot, is the very violent criminal activity with guns that we try to prevent as a prosecutor. And my team has worked very hard to hold people accountable and responsible for committing those gun crimes. If people are committing violent gun crimes and using a weapon, and if they shouldn't have a weapon in the first place, one of the things that everyone talks about is stopping people from using guns to commit crimes. People who live in the neighborhoods where these crimes occur shouldn't have to worry about walking their dog or having a barbecue and worry about the shots that are fired in their neighborhood and getting hit by a stray bullet, or their children being hit by a stray bullet when they're playing outside. They deserve better. 60% last year of the victims of our homicides were Black, minorities. There have been 24 homicides so far this year. 63% are minorities. We have to do better. And we have to hold, the answer of stopping violent crime isn't to let violent criminals out because we feel bad that they're in jail for doing the things that they've done, these horrific things that they've done in these neighborhoods, and by using guns to commit felonies. And I won't blame the store owner for a burglary that happens at their place that gets burglarized. It's not the store owner's fault. It's the people who are committing the burglary's fault. And that's who we need to hold accountable and responsible. The people that commit the crimes, the people out there in these very violent activities. And I understand that we did a good job in convicting these people of these shootings and these using guns to commit felonies. And the judges have sentenced them, who are responsible for the sentencings, have sentenced them appropriately. And that has an impact. And we need to keep making sure that we hold people responsible for the crimes that they commit. And if it means too many people are in prison or it's overcrowding situation, then we have to fix that, because that's not something that we should allow to happen. We need to have a new prison that allows room for programming so that we can rehabilitate people. But it's not just to release people, violent criminals on the street, because there's too many in prison.
1 minute response.
Well, Don, you're talking tough about gun violence against people of color, but you didn't seem to have a problem with Jay Gardner murdering James Hurlock in 2020. You let him go.
Well, we will move on to our next question. Staying on the topic of reform, particularly penal reform. Commenting on an Omaha World Herald article, State Senator John McCollister noted that a collaborative effort by the three branches of state government created LB 920, which has already been referenced here, to enact evidence-based strategies to reduce inmate population and lower recidivism while improving public safety. The proposal ultimately failed to overcome a legislative filibuster. Should a similar bill be introduced in the future, what strategies would you advocate as Douglas County Attorney? In particular, what is your position on mandatory sentencing guidelines, particularly with respect to drug use? Again, you'll have 3 minutes each, and we will begin with Mr. Klein, I believe. Yes.
Right, thank you. Well, there's a lot of things to talk about here. First of all, your question is incorrect with regard to drug usage. There are no mandatory minimums for drug usage. It's only for trafficking. I was asked to serve on the committee by the Chief Justice and the legislature with regard to looking into 920. My opponent wasn't, and neither was Senator McCollister. Based on my experience, they asked me to serve, and I did. And it was a good process. There were a lot of ideas that were tossed about. One of the most important things, and if you've noticed recently, the media picked up on it, was the Judiciary Committee talked about the importance of problem-solving courts and the expansion of those problem-solving courts. Those started in Douglas County. Those started with us. And I think they're a great benefact, a great thing for the state of Nebraska. Other counties have modeled their problem-solving courts after our problem-solving courts. But there were certain things in 920 that I didn't agree with. And I think that's part of the process. And it wasn't just me, it was county attorneys throughout the state and other law enforcement officials. It's not an answer just to simply say, let's just cut sentences in half of what they are now. Or let's not prosecute people for possession of drugs as a felony. let's make them misdemeanors and just give them tickets. As one of my colleagues said, who was one of our drug court coordinators and Veterans Treatment Court coordinators, who's now a judge, that would destroy our drug court system. Sometimes you have to hold people accountable and responsible and make it so that they'll go into drug court and appreciate the opportunity that they're given to stay out of the penitentiary. We don't want people to go to jail for addiction problems or mental health issues. We want to get them fixed. And that's why we have problem-solving courts. I'm all for the problem-solving courts. And there were other ideas as far as hiring more probation officers, better parole system. That was a good part of 920 that people agreed on. There could have been a compromise reached there, but one side didn't want to have a compromise. So I met with Senator Lathrop several times in my office with my chief deputy, and we talked about things. We had some great discussions, but it's too bad there wasn't a resolution of some of the things that would have really, I think, helped resolve some of the problems that we have with our prison system.
Well, first off, there are plenty of drug courts throughout the country that operate just fine without possession of a drug being a felony. And frankly, I think having drug possession being a felony counteracts what we're trying to accomplish in drug courts, which means that someone has a pending felony on their record as they're trying to get a job. Most employers will look at that and say, wow, we probably don't want to hire that person. So then they can't get a good paying job, which means they're less likely to complete the requirements of drug court. And my opponent was asked about this, and he couldn't give any specific numbers about success rates in terms of drug court in Douglas County. When I get in as Douglas County attorney, as part of my transparency initiative, I'll make all those numbers available for folks to evaluate whether or not we're doing a good job and see what we can do better. But I think that there are several provisions in LB 920 that were excellent provisions that the experts say would have reduced prison population by over 1,000 people by clearing out nonviolent offenders, clearing out geriatric prisoners, providing a parole process for them. And yes, we need to stop putting people in prison for minor possession. It's just antiquated. It's a leftover from the racist 1980s war on drugs that everyone agrees now was a mistake. It was racist, it was classist, and it created a generation of people who spent most of their lives in the penal system and ruined neighborhoods throughout the country, including North Omaha and other parts of Omaha. We need to move beyond the 1980s in this state, not including the music. But the fact is that we are stuck in a 1980s mindset when it comes to criminal justice in this state. The fact is we had a majority of legislators who were in favor of LB 920, but my opponent lobbied against it, and that was a major reason why it failed. And now our prisons are getting more and more crowded. We need to change what's going wrong in our system.
Got 1 minute.
Thank you. This reform stuff that my opponent talks about hasn't worked so well around the country. Portland has done just what he said about making all drug possession crimes misdemeanors. And now those people are out in the streets in Portland, and Portland's being destroyed as a city because of these crazy reform ideas from people that don't know what they're talking about. And it's interesting hearing you talk about transparency, particularly in light of the articles in Omaha World Herald, where you weren't very transparent and didn't tell the truth. So, I mean, those kinds of things, you throw things out like that at times, and it's really troubling because you have a hard time telling the truth. And so the most important thing to recognize here is that our drug courts are a great service to the community, and that's something that's very effective, and they started with Douglas County.
Thank you. We're going to turn to a topic that has been brought up a few times now and face it head on. During the public unrest following the killing of George Floyd in May 2020, Jake Gardner shot and killed James Scurlock. The county attorney decided that a grand jury need not be called to investigate the shooting and released Mr. Gardner from police custody. Amid a public uproar over the decision, the county attorney subsequently convened a grand jury and it found sufficient evidence to merit a trial for Mr. Gardner. However, Mr. Gardner committed suicide before he could be tried, and his family has now brought a civil suit against the county. Looking back on this case, what course of action should the county attorney have pursued? Would you have done things differently, if any? You have a bit longer on this one because it's a pretty big one, so you've got 5 minutes each, and we'll begin with Mr. Pantos.
Thanks for asking this question. I mean, this is really the key issue in this race, was my opponent's failure of leadership in 2020. The fact is that there's no reason Jake Gardner should not have been arrested after murdering James Scurlock with an illegal weapon at night. That man came to his bar, loaded to bear, ready to hurt or kill someone. There was plenty of evidence of that. And I'm not saying he came down to kill James Scurlock personally, but he went there to kill someone. There's plenty of evidence of that. The grand jury, which was later convened with a great special prosecutor, Fred Franklin, they came out with that conclusion, 4 indictments. The fact is that my opponent's actions through that entire series, starting with the failure to charge Jake Gardner through October 7th, when he gave a press conference with the elite of the right-wing Republican Party in our state in front of the election commissioner's office, saying 2 major things. One, that he had left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican Party. And 2, that he endorsed Donald Trump, calling him a law and order president. Now, I haven't forgotten January 6th. I haven't forgotten the Trump presidency, but in my mind, there's nothing about Donald Trump that is law and order. Neither of those 2 things, neither order nor law and order. So that entire spring and summer and early fall was an abject failure. My opponent made the Douglas County Attorney's Office a hyper-partisan, Trump-supporting office. And it made us a national spectacle. And the fact is, folks, the wounds caused by his actions are still gravely felt throughout our community. And we need someone who will come in and work diligently, tirelessly to heal those wounds. Because the fact is, if we want to attract the best and brightest people to Omaha, to Douglas County, to work, live, and raise a family, and we all also want to keep people from moving away, the brain drain, we can't have a Douglas County attorney who says that Donald Trump is a law and order president and who fails to admit any mistakes during this entire travesty of justice. And I just can't help but reiterate how awful it was when James Scurlock was killed in the street and he never received justice. And I promise, as your next county attorney, I will work hard every day to heal those wounds in our community. And that's all I think I need to say on this subject.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's a very sad and sensitive situation in our community that occurred during those riots in downtown Omaha when the courthouse windows were broken and spray painted, and the federal courthouse was spray painted, and people were destroying property, and it's extremely sad, and it's a sad chapter for the city of Omaha. I wish that Jake Gardner and James Scurlock would have never come into contact with each other that night, but they did, and it's hard to listen to somebody who has absolutely zero experience in the courtroom from trying a jury trial, who doesn't understand the law of justification or self-defense, has never handled that in a jury trial. Expand about this case when you've never seen the police reports, you've never interviewed any witnesses, you had nothing to do with the investigation of this case, you have no idea what happened. And in the question itself, it says that I didn't convene a grand jury. Well, it's not my job to convene a grand jury. I have to make a decision there. That's how that works. The only time when we convene a grand jury is when somebody dies while they're in custody or attempting to be apprehended by police. I didn't release Jake Gardner. The police never arrested Jake Gardner. The police officers that were involved in this case were in total agreement with us, my chief deputy, several other people in a conference room in the briefing that took place with the command of the police department. Although it was a difficult decision in some ways because we knew it wouldn't be a popular decision, it was the right decision. It is based on the law and the evidence in that case and the investigation of the Omaha Police Department and the statements made by Jake Gardner with regards to his actions that evening. We were very transparent. People saw the video of Jake Gardner getting jumped from behind by James Skurlock. James Skurlock holding on to his neck, choking him. Jake Gardner didn't just do something immediately then. He instead pleaded with him, "Get off me, get off me." And then at some point, he fired the weapon. And as the law of self-defense in Nebraska, if you understood that, it's very straightforward. That if somebody feels that they're in fear for their life, and even if they're mistaken, if their belief is reasonable, then they have a right to use deadly force. Mr. Gardner used deadly force. And it's very sad that there's a loss of life in this case. There's 2 lives that were lost. But I don't know what happened in the grand jury. I wasn't part of the process that was involved in the grand jury. But I know from the evidence that I saw and the police saw and the law as I know it to be, I made the right decision, although it was not an easy decision. It was a difficult decision from the standpoint of knowing some people weren't going to be happy with that decision. But we make those kinds of decisions, Mr. Pantos, every day. Every day we make very charged, emotional decisions about cases that we handle involving very violent acts by people. And we make the call based on the law, and we make it based on the evidence that we're providing. That's the evidence that was provided in this case. That's the decision I made, and it was the right decision.
Mr. Pantos, you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, first of all, Jake Gardner was an active shooter when James Skurlock jumped on him. He'd already fired shots, so you left that part out conveniently. Second of all, listen to this sense of entitlement here from Mr. Klein. Absolutely, don't question any of my decisions. How dare you question? This is how he was throughout 2020 and continues to be this way. And it's just absolutely ridiculous that James Skurlock was murdered in the street and the grand jury came back with 4 indictments, and yet he's attacking the grand jury, he's attacking the special prosecutor, he's attacking anyone who dared question him. I think we need to have a county attorney who is willing to bring back fairness and a sense of equal justice in our criminal justice system. Right now, there's a definite lack of a sense of fairness within the county attorney's office. I need to bring that back, and I will do so as your next county attorney.
Thank you both for responding to that difficult question. We're going to shift gears here and talk a little bit about community involvement and what you would see for the future here. So what are your ideas for addressing the growing number of individuals with mental illness in our prison system? You have 3 minutes each, and Mr. Klein, you'll begin on this one.
Thank you. Well, I'm not going to let you get away with the Trump stuff either. I was asked, I said I voted for Trump. I didn't endorse Donald Trump. It was before January 6th. And that doesn't have any impact on how I run the office or administer at the county attorney's office. The mental health issue is a very important issue to me and always has been. We work our hardest to make sure that we have the resources to deal with people that have mental health problems. That's why we have a mental health diversion program to make sure we get help for the people that need it with regard to their mental health issues. Our drug courts really are our mental health issue court also, because we find sometimes there's people that, because of their addiction to drugs or use of drugs, they create a mental health problem for themselves. And sometimes people that have mental health issues use drugs to self-medicate. So our drug court's very important in that aspect in trying to help people that have mental health issues. My chief deputy and I also have worked very hard with leading doctors, psychiatrists in the state to get more people to be able to more quickly resolve issues with regard to competency and insanity, and get more help for the regional center, which I think is understaffed, and that's unfortunate from the state of Nebraska's perspective. We've also talked to the people at the Med Center to make sure that we have enough people who are going into this field and want to go into the field of forensic psychiatry, psychology, to help us deal with people that have mental health problems in the system. I also have a person that works 24/7, 7 days a week, on call for the Board of Mental Health. We help families that have people that they call us and say, my son, my daughter, my husband has a mental health problem. He needs help, and I think he's dangerous to himself or someone else. We have somebody that's on call 24/7, 365 days a year to help that family with that person that has a mental health issue, to appear before the petition with the Board of Mental Health to get them the help that they need in the least restrictive environment according to what the doctor's opinions are with regard to that person's mental health disorder.
Well, I absolutely agree that the state of Nebraska and Douglas County currently are falling down on the job when it comes to addressing the growing mental health issues facing our population. The fact is that our state penitentiary and our county jail have become mental health facilities, and that's the last place we want mental health treatment to be primarily provided. Great example, this spring there was funding put forth by the legislature for increased mental health services. Pete Ricketts attempted to veto that funding. Pete Ricketts, who is underwriting the campaign of my opponent. And the legislature overrode that veto, so great for them. The fact is that reasonable people know that we need a lot more money for mental health services. In Douglas County, we can start partnering with great local organizations like Community Alliance to divert as many offenders as possible away from the criminal justice system and into mental health treatment. But it's going to require leadership to push for that kind of investment in our community. I've been working in partnership with mental health providers for most of my career. I have a lot of information and knowledge about this. I know the folks in the field. I will definitely commit my leadership to making sure that the money is there for mental health treatment in our community. There's great examples in other parts of the country where they're successfully doing this. I think we can do it here, but the fact is we need leadership. And the current Ricketts-Klein regime is pushing in the wrong direction. We can do a lot better, and I'm looking forward to doing so as your next county attorney, because the fact is that if we keep letting this problem get worse, our prisons will continue to fill up with folks who are not getting appropriate treatment. And that's the real risk of prison overcrowding. The amount of programs right now are so limited that folks are not getting any treatment at all. And I promise to do something about that when I'm your next county attorney.
Mr. Klein, 1 minute.
1 minute, thank you. I didn't know that Pete Ricketts was running for Douglas County attorney. And I just filed my report, and you can take a look at who's contributed to my campaign. There's a lot of people that are underwriting my campaign because I have a tremendous amount of support and a lot of different people that have helped me in this campaign. One of the examples of somebody that has had mental health issues but was tremendously dangerous to our community was a case that we handled, and that was a fellow by the name of Nico Jenkins. And we convicted him of 4 murders. It was a horrific scenario during that time period. And there's a balance there. We have to be able to make sure that we treat people that have mental health issues, But when somebody might have a mental health issue, but they're not insane, and they're going out and killing people or hurting people, we need to make sure that person's put away for public safety. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to our final question from the SWONA group, and then we'll open it up to the floor. How will you engage neighborhood associations and neighborhood alliances in addressing and preventing crime? You have 3 minutes each, and Mr. Pantos, you are first on this one.
Thanks, this is a great question. I put this out months ago that I would love to have Deputy Douglas County attorneys adopt neighborhood associations and actually make it part of their job to attend neighborhood association and neighborhood alliance meetings so that they can inform the neighborhood associations of what's going on in the county attorney's office, so they learn more about the office and how it runs and how it operates, but also that they can get feedback from the neighborhood associations about public safety issues that are going on in their community. I think it would be great for just providing some additional sort of diversity to their job, so they're getting out into the community. They're not just largely in the at 1701 Farnham, but also it helps to inform the community about the county attorney's office. This is something I proposed in a couple different forums with neighborhood associations with whom I've been visiting all the time. A lot of these neighborhood associations tell me, wow, we've never had anyone from the county attorney's office visit with us at all and to listen to our concerns and our public safety issues. There's a lot of public safety issues that are going on throughout our county that are just, I think, being ignored. And by having that kind of relationship, I think it would better inform the county attorney's office. It would better inform the criminal justice system as a whole. And it would help to improve the sustainability of the neighborhood associations because they'd feel more connected to downtown and what's happening in our criminal justice system. So I absolutely support strengthening and making more vital our neighborhood associations because honestly, neighborhoods are what makes Omaha and Douglas County great. It's the strength of our neighborhoods, and the more we can do to strengthen those associations and alliances of associations, the better things will be to recruit and retain new families coming to our community, and also make sure that we don't have the brain drain that we're suffering with right now.
Mr. Cohen?
Thank you. Yeah, I think communication is very important between people in the community. We do community outreach all the time. I go to churches, I go to parishes, I go to neighborhood associations, I go to precincts. We have citizens groups that we meet at the different police precincts, whether it's Northwest Omaha, Southwest Omaha, well, wherever it might be. You have no idea how busy our deputy county attorneys are in their daily work because you've never been there. I don't think you've ever been in the courthouse in the criminal division of the county attorney's office. They're extremely busy people, and they would love to be a part of the community more so than they are, and to be able to go out to different neighborhood associations. I don't think it's feasible because they're so busy, but it's important for us to hear from the community. So I think putting together a portal for neighborhood associations to come through to get a hold of us about an issue that they see in the community. I would like to hear about it with regard to crime, particularly. I think it'd be important to have the city prosecutor involved because the city prosecutor handles zoning issues. They handle the misdemeanors, which are most of the things that the neighborhood association is going to be concerned about, not necessarily felonies. So I think a portal would be a good idea to have people send in any questions they have, concerns they have from a criminal justice issue. And then our deputies or myself or my chief deputy can answer those kinds of questions on a daily basis. But to say we're going to send somebody out to every neighborhood meeting isn't very realistic because of the concerns we have with regard to doing their job in handling cases before them.
I mean, I would just say that if you're already giving up, maybe you shouldn't serve another 4 more years, because the fact is that I think with funding, with improved management, all sorts of things, we can do those things. I mean, I just tweeted about this a couple hours ago. The Office of Justice Programs just announced $57.1 million of funding available for criminal justice reform for county attorneys and law enforcement, district attorneys, et cetera. Let's step up our game here and actually do something that would justify getting that funding so that we can retain deputy county attorneys. And we haven't talked about, the reader included this in their discussion about our race, the huge turnover problem in your office. Well, maybe that's part of the reason why we can't get anyone going to these neighborhood associations. I would definitely work on that. But let's not give up. I want to bring the energy in so we can actually do these kinds of things. So I'm looking forward to doing that as your next county attorney.
Well, thank you both. I think we'll go ahead and do formal closing statements now before we move on to questions from the audience. So, Mr. Klein, you have 3 minutes if you would like to start.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, thank you again for putting this on tonight. If you look at what I've done in that office, I have about 35 years of experience doing this kind of work. My chief deputy and I have about 60 years of experience in doing law enforcement work. We have over 200 jury trials that we've done together. My opponent has 0. And he talks about his management skills. Well, we've seen what those management skills are with the mess that you made, according to the Omaha World Herald, when you left the legal aid as your administrator or director or whatever you want to call it. This job is so important, and it needs somebody that has some common sense and can guide the criminal justice system the way we've done it over a number of years. And it's so important to have somebody in there that has the wherewithal and the knowledge. You can't make reform without having that knowledge. And you have to be able to have some foundation to give an opinion in the law. And I'll just read you something that somebody who does have foundation as an expert has said. Tom Riley, the Douglas County Public Defender, who's been there for years, is a staunch Democrat, gave me this quote yesterday, or a couple days ago. I've known Don since he started his career as a deputy Douglas County attorney more than 40 years ago. He has a wealth of experience and has always conducted himself with honesty and integrity. He has managed the Douglas County Attorney's Office with that same honesty and integrity. Don has been instrumental in creating and administering numerous problem-solving courts and diversion programs in Douglas County, including Veterans Court, Young Adult Court, and Drug Court, to name a few. He has served the people of Douglas County well and is the best qualified person to be the county attorney for Douglas County. That's the person who's on the other side of the fence with the cases that we handle in our office, and who's in his party, and who's come out with that statement about the way I've handled myself over the years and the honesty and integrity that we have in the Douglas County Attorney's Office. I think that says it all.
Folks, I think we had a great exchange tonight. I think you've heard from my opponent, someone who's given up. He's already said we can't do things differently. We can't do this, we can't do that. We don't have the money for this. These reforms are too much. You can't take this away, you can't do that. It's all about what we can't do. And I think it's time to actually bring someone in with the energy and the vision and determination to actually bring about criminal justice reform that works for our community and keeps our streets safe on the one hand, but is more fair and equal on the other. During in answering a totally different question, he talked about Donald Trump, and he's trying to play both sides of that one. But the fact is that in early May, my opponent took time away from his job to stand in front of the courthouse and endorse the primary candidacy of Jim Pillen, who is now the Republican nominee. He did a press conference for Jim Pillen. So he's trying to say, I'm not this, Republican operative now, but then he also did that. Jim Pillen has made it very clear that he wants to criminalize abortion in our state. That's his #1 priority. And that's the guy he endorsed, not because he was the nominee, but to help him become the nominee. This is in local media. You can Google it. So the person who's sitting next to me right now is in the same league as Trump and Pillen and everyone who wants to eliminate democracy and eliminate reproductive freedom in our state. I don't know why anyone who cares about freedom of choice, cares about civil rights, would vote for this guy. He's already given up on reform. And so now all he wants to do is be the person who is going to enable folks like Pillen and Trump in our community to take your rights away. That's why I think it's so important that folks make sure you return your ballot, make sure you vote against voter ID, and make sure you vote for candidates who share your values. And I hope that I've convinced you that you and I have the same values, and that you'll vote for me if you haven't already voted, either by mail or at your drop-off box or in person on November 8th. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all. We will now move to our in-person questions. If any of our audience members have questions, we have a microphone over here. You'll notice there are two. Please make sure that you're standing where both can hear you. If you do have a question, please let us know your name, and then you can address the question you have to one or both of the candidates. So anyone has a question, feel free to jump right up there.
I do have a question for you, Mr. Pantos, more specifically. I've heard you be very outspoken that you would not prosecute women or doctors who are involved in performing abortions if the Nebraska legislature would adopt a ban or otherwise restrict abortions. Is it your belief that the county attorney can simply choose not to prosecute or enforce laws that they don't personally agree with? Because as a woman and a fellow attorney, it is a little bit concerning to see this bit of a false information being spread to women voters that the county attorney would be able to pick and choose on such a sensitive issue.
Thank you for the question. Well, Mr. Klein already said he chose not to prosecute Jake Gardner. So obviously there's a huge amount of discretion when it comes to the county attorney's office. There are lots of people that have crimes alleged against them, and they decide was there a probable cause, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's a general matter about prosecutorial discretion. But I want to address this issue very specifically because, as I mentioned earlier, growing up, the right for a woman to choose and make healthcare decisions with her doctor was a fundamental right. The United States Supreme Court in the early 1970s, this was not the 1960s Warren Court. This was the Nixon Court, and you had folks like Berger and Rehnquist and all those folks on there. This was not a liberal court. They voted 7-2 Roe v. Wade to preserve and protect the freedom and the privacy of healthcare decisions. So my question, maybe back to you, is this: how can a county attorney in good conscience support a law that would criminalize the privacy and the healthcare decisions of a woman and her doctor, supporting the prosecution of doctors? I mean, we're seeing this across the country now, where miscarriages are being prosecuted. We saw in Norfolk where text messages between a mother and her daughter were subpoenaed by local law enforcement, or I should say Facebook direct messages. I mean, the fact is that our fundamental freedoms are at stake, and I think it's absolutely appropriate for a candidate for this office to make really clear where they stand on this issue. Because the fact is, and it's not just me, there are district attorneys and attorneys generals across the country that are making the same statement. I wasn't the first to do it. I know I won't be the last. The fact is, this is one of the defining issues of this election, is where you stand on a woman's right to choose. Now, if this is your major issue and you're firmly committed to banning abortion in Nebraska and putting women and doctors in prison, that is your right as a voter to make that decision. But I'm standing against that. I'm standing for freedom.
Mr. Klein, would you like to add anything?
Just briefly. I mean, it's not an issue. It's a legislative issue at this point in time. It's not a county attorney issue. And yeah, there's county attorneys around the country that have said the same things kind of that you have about criminal justice reform too. They're wrong about that. It's unethical really for a county attorney to say, I don't know what the law is going to be, and I don't know what the facts and circumstances are of a case, but I'm not going to prosecute it. I've been doing this job for 35 years. There's been abortion laws on the books. It's never been an issue. It's never come up even with regards to a prosecution of a doctor or a woman. You throw out terms like people are going to get prosecuted for having a miscarriage. It's like, come on, that's so ridiculous. You're so overreaching. You're trying to scare people, and it's just ridiculous to do that. And it's unethical to say that without knowing the facts and circumstances of every case or what the law is, that you're absolutely not going to do something. What if it was a situation where somebody was 9 months pregnant and they decided they broke up with their boyfriend, they decided they're going to take this child and abort the child, and did it in a hotel room and somebody performed an abortion. Is that something you're not going to prosecute? You're not going to prosecute any cases like that? Everyone would agree, even pro-choice, that that's not a situation that they agree with, that somebody who's 8.5 months, 9 months pregnant to have an abortion in that kind of a situation. So there's facts and circumstances about every case, and you make your decision and you use your prosecutorial discretion with regard to what the facts and circumstances are about that particular case. Not just, well, I'm not going to do this. I've made a decision, I'm not going to do it. It depends on the facts and circumstances. It depends on what the law is. It's as simple as that. It's unethical to say otherwise.
Can I respond?
Let's give a second to see if there are other, because we only have so much time. So are there other questions from the floor?
I just want to say in terms of prosecuting miscarriages, Google it.
Google what?
Other questions?
Prosecuting miscarriages
I see
is
some.
a fact that's happening in Texas and other places.
Here.
Speaking of Texas, I do have a question for you, Mr. Pantos. One of your team members that you tout has openly said and applauded police officers getting murdered in Texas. What do you have to say about that?
I'm not aware of that.
Really? You don't know about that? That's convenient.
Next question, please.
My name's Elise Morgan. I am a Republican, and my dad is a former mayor. And my question is, where do you stand on domestic violence? I can say that for myself, and this all goes on the same topic, I was pregnant and I was a victim of domestic violence. I reported it. I took pictures. I did everything right. My friends, my family, my doctor, everything right. My ex is a firefighter, and I am now on trial. I was investigated for if I was really pregnant. Abortion clinics were visited. I am pro-life. And I just want to understand, will you be consistent and stand by your decisions? And is it okay to abuse your pregnant girlfriend if she is going to get an abortion? I want to understand for myself, because I think if this is happening to me, what happens to these other girls that don't have a family or the resources that I have?
Thank you for your question. I think at the core of that is, it sounds domestic violence, domestic abuse.
Well, sure, domestic violence is something that I've prosecuted many cases, homicide cases that involve domestic violence. We have individuals that specialize in our office. We have put together a specific unit with regard to domestic violence, both misdemeanor and felonies. We took those over from the city prosecutor's office because of our expertise and training in that area. So it's something that's very near and dear to me, to make sure that we don't allow any domestic violence. Obviously the power and control of perpetrators is something that we know about, we look into, and sometimes there are very difficult cases. And I can't comment about your case, Elise, but certainly we are there for victims of domestic violence, and we're doing everything we can to confront that problem.
I don't think we're doing anywhere near enough in our community to combat domestic violence. And you run for office, Douglas County Attorney, and all of a sudden people start reaching out to you. Oh, my case got dropped. I got juggled from one county attorney to another, but they kept quitting, and so my case never got processed or prosecuted. I've had so many stories of women whose cases never got followed through on because of the huge turnover and just the lack of prioritization of domestic violence and sexual assault in the county attorney's office recently. I'm not talking about 20 years ago, but right now there does seem to be a crisis, and we have this on our literature, just the huge number of unprocessed rape kits in our community. That continues to be a huge problem. I will definitely prioritize that. So I think it was incredibly brave, Elise, for you to come forward and talk about your story. I'm sure, like you said, there's many, many other women who are in a similar situation, women who are threatened, harmed, and abused by people in power or people with power. And, they need to have an ally in the county attorney's office. And I definitely promise to be that strong ally.
Other questions from the audience? Probably have time for one or two more, if there are any. I see some students. Anyone going to get extra credit if you ask a question? Don't want to deprive you of that extra credit. All right. Well, then on that note, we will close for this evening. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Please visit League of Women Voters of Nebraska table over here to the side. If you have any questions about the election, you can also visit vote411.org for a personalized election tool. I again want to thank our participants tonight for tonight's conversation. I'd like to thank SWONA for their sponsoring of this event and KPAO for making sure that we can get it out to voters so that they can hear directly from the folks wanting to represent and run our government for us. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.